Hey professional Padawans, Tactical Tailor here with some tips on how to assemble B1s without any headache. Now as you can see here, I've put all these B1s together. I only have 3 of them together for Shatterpoint. There are 3 more to do, and I know that the community has been having a lot of issues with Kalani and the B1s, so I'm going to show you how I assembled them with no headaches. Now there's a couple tools that you're going to need to do this. Obviously you need clippers, you need some way to shave off mold lines or any extra things for when you clip, and the other thing you're going to need is blue tack, right? It's that poster tack, sticky tack, whatever the heck you call it in your area, but blue tack is essential. You're going to want a bunch of pieces of it, and the first thing we're going to make is we're going to make a stick with blue tack on the tip of it. And what this is going to allow us to do is grab some of those finer pieces, like the back of the head, those little nubs on the back of the head. You're going to be able to grab those finer pieces and stick them to this while you're gluing them into the head of the B1. Now the other thing you're going to do, and everyone on the planet who uses plastic glue, please don't get upset with me, but you are going to need to get super glue. All right, I use Loctite super glue. You can use whatever super glue works for you. But there are just a couple of instances where super glue is really great just for getting that really quick stick, and these B1s really help with it. Those tiny joints on the B1s, once you start melting the plastic in there, and I still have plastic glue, right? I'll use that every now and then. Once you start melting those tiny little connectors in the B1s, then it just becomes an absolute mess. So super glue, in my opinion, better for the B1s. Obviously, you're going to need your sprues with your B1s on it, and you're going to need the instructions. Now, the instructions you can find on a link in the video description below. And before we get started, I just ask everybody, if you don't mind liking and subscribing, that would be super fantastic. It helps the channel out a lot. Now, for this tutorial, we're going to be assembling B1 Battledroid A. That is the one that goes L01 through L19 or 20, I believe. And we are going to take, and this is my first tip, take every single step one step at a time, all right? So the first step in the instructions, step 1, is to glue L01 and L02 together. I'm not going to clip anything else off of the sprue. I'm only going to focus on the 2 items that I'm working on. I know a lot of people do an assembly line, they clip on everything and group everything together. Specifically the B1s, go one step at a time, all right? The other thing people are having trouble with is these tiny little connectors on the B1 leg joints here. What you want to be careful to do is to not clip off the little nubs that are in there. So for the bodies, what I usually do is I just shake them back and forth and they'll come right off. They're going to leave a nasty little spot on the piece itself. There's like a little nub there. It's not really very easy to see, but we can shave that off easy enough with a X-Acto blade or a sharp blade. You just want to be careful that you don't go too deep, so that way you don't cut any of the detail. You especially want to be careful on the part where the leg connection goes, where you don't want to dig away at that too much, because like I said, these pieces connect on a very, very tiny little connection. So just be wary with your X-Acto blade. Don't be digging around too much on those tiny leg connectors. Now, pro tip number 2 is to dry fit everything at least once. Measure twice, cut once. In this case, dry fit twice, glue once, right? So this, dry fits together perfectly like that. Of course, you have to drop your minis as well. If you're not dropping minis, are you really assembling? Dry fits together twice, just like that. Perfect. Dry fit twice, glue once, folks. Now, for this part of the miniature, I will be using plastic glue. The next step for the B1s, step 2, is to put the backpack on, and I actually do that on step 3. I do step 2 as putting the head together and putting the head on. It seems to be a little bit easier to put the head on when the backpack antenna are not in the way. So we're going to tackle the head next. Now this is me just cleaning up the connection points of the sprue and also any mold lines. So what I'm going to do now, with the little nub facing down onto my finger, I'm going to take my little blue tack stick here, and I'm just going to push it onto the top of the weird back thingies that go in the back of the head. You'll see the nub is facing away from the blue tack, and then what I can do here is I can actually put a little tiny dab of plastic glue on the nub that connects into the back of the head here, right? And then all I have to do is put them together like this. And as you can see, I am still dry fitting. Even though there's only one place for this to go, and it looks like it'll be pretty easy, I'm still dry fitting there. Another tip here, my glue got a little clogged up, so what I'm going to do is just jam a ornament hanger in there. You can also use a paper clip just to get that unclogged. Now I'm barely exerting any pressure on here whatsoever. I'm just keeping this little piece where it's supposed to go. If you want to remove the blue tack from the piece, all you have to do is kind of hold that little piece with your thumb and then twist very gently the blue tack off of the piece there. And then you can adjust it with your fingers if you need to, and then just let it dry. Now, if you don't want to set this down, what can you do? You can stick it in some blue tack, and blue tack will hold this piece up for you. Just like so. But once that nub in the back was dry, I went ahead and used plastic glue to glue the head into the neck into the joint, and I also used a little plastic glue to glue the backpack onto the back as well. And now since I stuck this guy in some blue tack, I can, while it's drying, just set it down on the table. Now that the top of our B1 is dry, we're going to affix the legs next. I always start with the legs for these guys, that way they have something to stand on while you try and fix the guns. Because guns are a two-handed weapon, and two-handed weapons are just super difficult to get correctly. For me, personally, it could be super easy for other people. Now what you want to do is you want to grab a leg that is going to stand flat on something, right? In this case, on B1A, it is the right leg. I believe all the right legs are flat. Even the one crouching has a flat leg. Again, dry fit the piece on first. In this case, you're trying to figure out where it feels like it makes sense for this to go. You can just barely see on that joint when I start to tilt the leg backwards, it starts to come away from the model, right? So essentially what I do is I just push on the joint itself towards the body until it feels like this thing is flat. And eyeball this as well. If you look at the instructions, it looks like this leg is sticking out a little farther than the other legs, so kind of something like this should work. Next, what you're going to want to do is switch over to your handy dandy super glue and put the tiniest little dot of super glue on the leg joint on the body. Switch back over to the leg you're affixing and put it back in the relative position of where it should be. If it feels like it's not holding well enough, you can easily snap this off if you used a little amount of super glue and try to reposition, put a little bit more super glue on, and then just let it sit and dry. Alternatively, if you want to do this quickly, you can grab a little bit of an applicator or an instant set, etc., a super glue accelerator, etc., to try and get this to set a little bit quicker. And now comes in our next tool, which is a rattle can. Essentially anything that stands super tall that you can put blue tack on top of, right? And what you're doing here is you wish to have your model stand on top of something without using one of your hands. So essentially I'm just putting him in the blue tack and I'm pushing his foot down into the blue tack. So he stands relatively flat on top of the rattle can. Once you get him essentially flat on there, you can now attach the other foot with the other foot standing, the other leg, excuse me, standing with the other foot on top of the rattle can's lid flat. So here's our little guy. He's standing on top there. His foot looks relatively flat on top of this can. I might just push it down a little bit more so that way it looks like his foot is flat. And I'm just going to take this other leg here and I'm going to once again dry fit it up against this miniature. Now essentially what we're doing here is we're taking away the need to hold on to the mini as we're trying to push this leg on, right? So we can use our hands for stability instead of trying to use our the hands to hold on to the miniature. Now this here is kind of best guesswork, and again, these are B1s, so if they don't look unbelievably perfect as they're standing up, that's okay, because B1s are kind of supposed to look wonky, right? They're not usually in the best shape ever, so if you screw up a little bit with setting these guys in here, maybe they've already seen some combat and they're spare parts or something. They're B1s. They're supposed to get beat up. So I just put a little super glue in the joint of the leg there, and now I'm going to just try and fix this on here where both feet are flat on the top of this rattle can. And there we go. Both feet are essentially flat when I stand them on top of this rattle can here. It's a little hard to see, so I've grabbed an MCP base here. And you can definitely see that both feet lay more or less flat. There's a little bit of a gap there, but not a big deal. And the reason we use a rattle can is because it's super tall. It's got a nice flat top, so it's super easy for us to hold our mini up here without having to crouch our neck or our back to figure out what we're doing. Now that our B1 is standing on top of this rattle can and he's more or less dry, I'm going to go ahead and super glue the arms on here as well. Now I'm going to use super glue for the arms because, again, of that quick drying action that super glue is known for. And as we keep our B1 standing on top of this rattle can, what we can do is not worry about having to hold on to him. We can worry about positioning the gun to where it needs to go, as well as just putting slight pressure so that way our joints line up correctly. Now again, with our smaller arm that is holding the other arm that's holding the gun up, we're going to dry fit first just to make sure we know where this is supposed to go. And then we will use our blue tack stick here to hold onto one of the pieces of the arms as we apply some glue. You don't want to apply too much. If you do, like I did there, grab a little bit of paper towel and soak some of that up. And then you grab your other piece and push that into place where it feels like it should go. Now here with the second arm, what I normally like to do is switch back to plastic glue. So that way, if this arm snaps off, the other arm snaps off, the plastic glue should have welded this arm to the gun and to the mini. So that way, if the gun arm snaps off, it'll be super, super easy to fix it. And again, because our dude is being held up by blue tack, it's super easy to just line up this gun arm where it should go and stick it onto the miniature. And there you go, folks. That is one B1 complete, absolutely zero headache, and it only took me a few minutes. Now, again, the key is you need blue tack, a stick, something tall and flat like a rattle can, super glue, as well as plastic glue for this, okay? And it'll make your B1 assembly super, super easy. If you liked the video, please consider liking and subscribing, as well as going over to professionalcasual.com, where we have all of our blog posts for MCP and Shatterpoint, as well as other games and podcasts, etc. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next one.